our last chapter. Chapter 14, The Case of the Weird Witch. Mr. E worked so hard the next few days that my class caught up with all Mrs. Brisbane's lesson plans. But it wasn't all hard work. He also read us a fur-raising story about a secret code. And it turned out that the secret code was also a math problem. During the day, I was busy trying to keep up with the lessons. At night, I'd make notes in my notebook so I'd remember what we learned in class. But there was more than just schoolwork going on. Mr. E talked to Hurry Up Harry about getting back to class on time. And suddenly, Harry wasn't late anymore. One day, Phoebe came up to my cage smiling. She held up her wrist with the daisy watch on it. "See, Humphrey, I still have it," she said. "And guess what? Yesterday after school, I went to a meeting of this new club. It's only for kids whose parents are in the military. We talked about our parents, and we played a game, and we're having a Halloween party too." "That's positively great," I squeaked. I could tell Phoebe was feeling better already, and she remembered her homework all week too. Joey and Thomas were together all the time. I even heard them whispering about their Halloween costumes. They said something about hats, or maybe it was something about bats, and they also mentioned grasses. Maybe they meant glasses. Were they going to dress up as bats with glasses, or were hats made of grasses? You can never guess what humans will wear for Halloween. There was so much talk about Halloween, I couldn't help thinking about last year's party. I didn't know much about Halloween then. All I knew was that humans wore the costumes and the class would have a party. But last year we had a different class. We had a different teacher, and I was a different hamster. Oh, I was still Humphrey, but I was just starting to learn about school. Now I knew a lot more. I just didn't know what my costume would be. The night before Halloween, Aldo came into room 26 and stopped. He looked around and said, "Will you look at that? It's almost as clean as when Mrs. Brisbane was here." "And where is she now?" I squeaked loudly. I guess Aldo didn't understand me. "How do you like my costume?" Aldo twirled around. He looked the same as usual. He had on a blue shirt and black pants, and he was pushing his cleaning trolley. "This is my costume! Get it?" Aldo roared with laughter, and I realized that he was joking. I like jokes. I think most hamsters do. "I need a costume too," I squeaked. "Boing, boing," I agreed. "I know you're excited," Aldo said. "I talked to Richie today. He's excited too." Richie was his nephew. He'd been in room 26 last year. "He's going to be a monster," Aldo explained. It was hard to imagine Richie as a monster. He was a very nice human. Maybe there are nice monsters too. I'll bet there are. When Aldo sat down to have his dinner, I was hoping for a pumpkin treat, and I wasn't disappointed. "Trick or treat, buddy," he said. "Thanks, Aldo. Trick or squeak," I called after him. Later, when Aldo was gone, I told Og, "Tomorrow is Halloween." "Boing, boing," he said. "I need a costume," I said, walking toward the edge of our table. "Don't you?" Boing, 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 boing. He didn't seem to like the idea of wearing a costume. "You don't have to wear a costume, Og, but I want one," I said. I had an idea today when I was thinking about the Sherlock Holmes story, and I have a plan. Og dived into his water with a giant splash. I dashed away to keep from getting wet. I slid down the table leg and scurried across the room to the shelves where the art supplies were stored. Luckily, they were low to the ground, so I could easily scramble up the side of the bin and slip over the edge. Once I was inside, I found what I wanted. I gnawed and gnawed until I had exactly what I needed for my costume. Holding my treasure in my mouth, I climbed up a stack of glue sticks, hopped onto a tall jar of glitter, and slid back over the edge. I swung back up to the table and went straight to my cage. I hid my costume in my beddings and closed the cage door behind me. "Boing, boing," Og twanged. "My costume is a surprise, Og. You'll find out what it is tomorrow," I squeaked back at him. "Everybody will find out tomorrow." There were no costumes on Halloween morning. There were just the usual lessons, but after lunch, Mr. E sent everyone out of the room to change into their costumes. Simon's mom and Small Paul's dad were there to help. When the room was empty, Mr. E turned toward Og and said to me, "You're about to have a big surprise." "So are you," I squeaked. Then he left the room too. While the room was empty, I made sure my costume was still under my bedding. It seemed like a long time before the door finally opened again. In walked a tall pirate and a short ninja. I guess they were Tall Paul and Small Paul. Then a princess with a sparkling crown on her head came in. That was Holly. More kids came into the classroom in amazing costumes. Phoebe wore a camouflage military uniform. Kelsey was a ballerina in a pink tutu. Her eye was back to normal, and she looked very graceful. Then, a very surprising pair came in. They were dressed alike in long coats and those deerstalker hats like Sherlock Holmes wore, and they carried huge magnifying glass. Thomas and Joey were both dressed like Sherlock Holmes, so they in a superhero costume with a blue cape, along with Harry, who was all wrapped in white like a mummy. Then something amazing happened. A table rolled through the door. There was a plate on the table with a knife and fork next to it, and on the plate was Rosie's head. Eek! I squeaked. Rosie smiled, and everybody laughed. Someone had put a box over her shoulders with a hole for her head, and she had painted a tablecloth. The plate, knife, and fork were glued on. It was the best costume I'd seen so far. My friends sat at their table and waited, or in their tables. In Rosie's case, we all waited quite a while before the door opened again. I figured I'd see Mr. E, but that's not what I saw at all. We'll pick it up there tomorrow.